So welcome, everybody. Very excited to be here today. We've got a group of us up here. We're going to talk about how to turn kick-ass design into kick-ass code. Just some quick introductions. I'll let everybody, we're from RGA, but I'll let...
My name's Drew Peterson. Online I go as Kirby Says Hi, and so follow me on Twitter. And I'm an open standards developer.
Hey everybody, Mason Robinson. I'm a tech lead at RGA, and I really like growing lumberjack beards. I grew one just for the conference, so that's special for you guys.
Hi, I'm John Hackett. I'm a tech lead at RGA.
And I'm Will Turnage. I'm the VP of Technology there. Was anyone playing with the Arduino stuff yesterday? Because I brought, this is my Arduino shirt that I'm wearing, so it lights up. And right now it's hooked up to Twitter, so if anybody tweets me at Webahead during this, I'll get a log here and the shirt will light up. So that's going to be one of the ways we can kind of keep this a little more fun and interactive. So just to tell you guys a little bit about RGA, we're an agency. We've got 8 offices globally, almost 1,000 employees. We've been around for about 35 years, and the core of what we've been for all those years is this intersection between design and technology. In the 70s and 80s when we got our start, it was as a visual effects company for film and movies. We actually have a technical Oscar, which is awesome. But you know, and this was back when you had to write your own rendering engines and your own camera control engines and servos. But the core DNA of who we are is finding out what kind of amazing things can happen when you have designers and programmers sitting side by side and working together. Just to give you some kind of ideas of what we do now, we have a really large client base of very high-profile consumer engagements. Nike, L'Oreal, MasterCard, Verizon Wireless, Johnson & Johnson, you name it, we've probably done work with them at some point. The interesting thing that I think separates us from a lot of the work that you guys are doing is we don't make our own products. We're kind of hired by other people to create great things on their behalf. So a lot of times we are very technology agnostic. We don't have say in what technologies we can use. We have to use their IT infrastructure. We have to abide by their own timelines and guidelines and deadlines. So a lot of what we've sort of learned over the years is how to work well under those constraints. But the one thing that we definitely have learned after all this time is that good design is really hard to pull off. The 2 quotes I have up here, this one's from the guy who wrote The Little Prince. Perfection is achieved not when there's nothing left to add, but when there's nothing left to take away. And the other quote is from Wes Jackson, who's a pioneer in like sustainable agriculture and farming. And he says, if your life's work cannot be accomplished in your lifetime, you're not thinking big enough. And there's these sort of 2 fundamental differences here of trying to minimize something and make it small and beautiful, but also thinking big. And that's sort of the struggle that we deal with every day of how to mix those 2. And good design comes when you're actually able to successfully intertwine those things. So found this great Tumblr blog called Hovering Art Directors. .tumblr.com. It's great. It's just nothing but photos of art directors hovering. I think we've all sort of been there at one point in time. We try not to do that. But at the same time, one size does not fit all. There's not sort of one best way to do good design. It varies based on the client. It varies based on the projects. So what we've kind of done today is got everyone to come together and give sort of short details or descriptions of what they've done on their teams and how they've worked to sort of create this great work. So I'm going to turn over to John, who's going first.
So I guess just a little bit of background for the sort of projects that I typically run. They're mostly executed in the front end, so HTML, CSS, and JS, but the frameworks we use, the platform we're on, it sort of depends on the client's constraints. And I guess the majority of things I've been working on these days have been using third-party APIs tied in with client APIs. So it gets really complex, and it's a very constrained environment, and sort of it's really difficult to sort of work in constraints to deliver code and good design together. So I guess just a little bit about the traditional agency process where we were a few years ago, which is essentially just shoving the analog in the digital. Essentially, you have your print ad, you have your TV commercial, And for years, that's sort of what most of the industry produced, was these brochure websites that just had basic information about a product. You consumed it, you walked away. And the same thing was sort of, the next phase was doing these sort of flash experience sites, which were essentially just a commercial shoved into the web. And those were also sort of just like, you consume it, you walk away, not very interesting. And then the web evolved into sort of a different place where it was more focused on offering utility to users. So, given that sort of change, the process has shifted in how we work as an agency. Essentially, tech is now critical towards any, in any concept. We actually have to be involved in the creative process before anything actually gets coded, so that we can sort of help them understand the constraints. There's now a massive sort of knowledge overhead that is necessary to execute pretty much anything within the digital space. Specifically, I'm speaking, Facebook is sort of the hottest thing in our world right now for agencies to produce products in, and it's a highly, highly constrained environment, not just from a code perspective, but from a design perspective. You're sort of trying to shove the internet into this tiny little window inside another website, and that creates a lot of really interesting, sort of like really interesting, struggles between creative and technology, and sort of making something that works well for users, but is also sort of have a high design aesthetic is really tricky in this space. So what usually helps is to really break things down from possible and feasible. Design tends to think of things in terms of what's possible, and tech is always thinking, what's feasible, what can I build on time and under these constraints? And feasible really breaks down into two different types of feasibility, certainty and uncertainty. Sort of, I know I can build that thing because I've done it before, and I might be able to build that, but I have to figure it out, I have to try it, we have to see if it actually works the way you think it works. And so this is sort of a quick example of sort of how we've adapted this sort of process of testing sort of that uncertain feasibility, is to do sort of prototyping, kind of just go in there and see if you can massage the data. So in this example, a creative simply asked me if there was a way to actually pull your best friends out of Facebook using the API versus the 400 people that general users are friends with, and you have no idea if that's just a work friend, a casual acquaintance, someone that just randomly friended them and accepted. And we wanted to create an experience that sort of pulled out those stronger connections and sort of served them up to you in this specific ask. So in order to test this out, I had to sort of go through a number of iterations of making Open Graph requests and creating a simple output of that to sort of test, just using my own friends, like what results gave me people that I was closer to. And essentially I just came up with a really simple weighting for these sort of interactions. And likes are sort of a meaningless thing. People will just give away likes. But comments on photos were really telling, because usually your best friends comment on photos. And so physical proximity was usually the most important. And that's what a photo is. You were at some date and time in the same place as someone else. So this was a really sort of good way to figure out how close you were to someone. And this is sort of just a screen capture of what the output of that was for my friends. And for most people that spend a good amount of time on Facebook, this was actually a fairly accurate way to sort of just pull out your best friends. Unfortunately, though, given this experiment, it sort of just showed the creatives the raw data, and it really wasn't what they were thinking it would be when they had it in their heads. So it kind of made us take the project in a totally different direction. So this was a really good example of how this can sort of steer a project away from a creative concept that in execution would not have been what they really wanted. And I'm gonna turn it over now to Mason and Drew, who are gonna walk through another example.
Check. Hey everybody.
Hey everyone. How's everyone doing?
Yeah.
JavaScript.
That's right. All right. So we would like to tell you a lovely story.
Yeah. So.
Well, it's called As You Wish, and the reason why we're doing this is because JSConf has a theme, and, well, we'd like to have a theme too.
Yes.
Okay. So this is a story about a developer named Wesley and a project named Buttercup.
Wesley and Buttercup first met at a tech kickoff meeting, and this is actually a timeline right here, and you can see on the timeline when that tech kickoff meeting happened, just a little over the waterfall.
Yeah. And it was love at first use case. Wesley would do anything that Buttercup asked.
Buttercup, I want non-standard Facebook dialogues.
As you wish.
They need to be globalized into 20 different languages.
As you wish.
And I have to look great in IE6. Yeah, that includes China too.
If you look at the graph, you can see it's like 36%. As you wish.
So Wesley toiled, chasing after Buttercup's hard deadline.
The task was impossible. Wesley worked as hard as he could, but in the end just ended up dead.
If you see this guy around, I think you just have to call that Batman JS 800 number, and we'll get him.
Should take care of it, yeah. What actually happened is that Wesley ended up shipping a trimmed-down version of Project Buttercup. Just wasn't the full experience, but it was still a product, because we always ship.
But then, phase 2.
And the real thing to keep in mind here is that often these projects work in phases, not iteratively. So we get Buttercup, phase 2.
Back for more.
Back for more. For the first time, phase 2 was not a lie. And Wesley successfully climbed the cliffs of insanity. He successfully navigated the fire swamp, and finally Buttercup shipped and was happy.
Yay.
Yay. So how did Wesley do it?
He made stuff. Quickly. Prototypes. So this might not seem like a revolutionary idea, but at advertising agencies, the process, especially with pitches and all that kind of stuff, tend to be a little bit waterfall. The client's already bought in kind of a little bit on a concept. They've been sold on a grand idea, and they want it now. The approach we take, which helps us do a lot of things, is to prototype. And there's kind of two types of prototypes that we work on. The first one is reactive prototypes.
And that answers the question, is this possible? Or like asks the question rather, is this possible? And the answer is just maybe, like let me see. Like things change so quickly these days with APIs that oftentimes you could do a month ago, you just can't. For example, like Facebook. They add a new feature.
Continuous integration, not cool for us.
And so we just have to kind of find out. And this is really a reactive thing. It's creative saying, we've got this great idea, and we want to know if it's possible. So we say, okay, let us see. So that's one type. You want to? Yeah. Okay. And so we've got an example of one little tiny prototype that one of our developers built, a good friend of mine, in about a day, less than a day. And it specifically is a completely fluid grid. These are obviously placeholder images.
Placeholder kitten.
Kittens. And the key thing, the ask was, can we make a grid that's completely fluid in any situation? And the answer is, yeah, you can. With fluid text, fluid interactions. I know most of you guys probably know all about this stuff.
Media queries.
Yeah, media queries, right? But the real key is that what may be possible isn't always feasible, and that's kind of what John was saying earlier too. Okay, so do you have anything else to add about that?
No.
Okay. Oh, sorry, wrong one. Oh boy.
You got a view.
Hang on.
There you go.
Oh boy. Yeah, that's what I thought. Sorry about this. Okay. So there's also a second type of prototyping that we kind of do, which is proactive prototypes.
Yeah, and this is the cool one for us, really. And it's harder in like agencies when you're working towards a project and everything's really focused on that project to do prototypes that might not be towards the end goal. So what we try to do, and this does a lot of cool things for us, is we try to think about something the client might need, and then just kind of in our spare time and try to make our own time to make prototypes that are kind of creative using technology that we don't normally get to use. So if we want to use like Node.js or some cool new physics engine, yeah, or something like that, then we get to try it out, in this environment, instead of the .NET Sitecore instance we have to work with normally. Sorry, Sitecore.
So as an example of this, we built, I'm just going to leave this open that time. We built a bookmarklet that would, we were trying to figure out if we could parse recipe data, get the calorie counts, and do some kind of smart language processing. So in a fairly short amount of time, a couple days, we stood up a quick Node instance and made this thing so that it will just look at almost any recipe on a website, scrape all the data, and send it to Wolfram Alpha to try to get calorie counts. And it takes a little bit because it's, it's software as a sketch, working software. It's a prototype. But hopefully once it comes back here, it should just say what the, there we go. It's a prototype, so there's no close button.
Yeah, but the idea here really is that, like, so if we can parse the page for recipe data, what else, could our creative people want to do with that? And we're just showing them, how possible it is to do this kind of stuff. And then we get to use, cool technology to do it too.
Yeah. And yeah, I think that's about it for us. So I guess Will can
turn it back over to Will for some closing remarks.
All right, last. Wait, where'd you put the? Oh, there we go. I found it. So last thing I was just going to talk about is, which is something very important that I don't think gets talked a lot about, is people skills. So we all want to build a cool thing, but we disagree a lot of times on what's the best way to do it, and that's okay. And I think that's the first thing, is learning that it's okay to disagree. And so this, a lot of these points that I'm going to make came from the last year we were involved with a redesign for MasterCard.us, which if you guys want to check it out on your browser, I think it's a really elegantly designed site. And in all my years, this was the best experience I'd ever had of visual designers and programmers really working closely together to make something very, very cool. Here's just two sample screenshots. You can go to the site and play around. But couple tips that kind of came out of that. One is be good teammates. A lot of times we get so embroiled in these projects, you end up fighting with each other, but ultimately we're all about making great things for our clients, doing good for our company, and really being focused on the most important thing, which is the end user. Collaborate. I should have put up a slide. The way we sit in our office is almost like this room. It's just open tables, and we don't have the tech team on one side and the visual team on the other. We sit by projects, and everyone's sitting around a table together. And it goes a really long way into just helping communication and helping open collaboration. Be open and transparent is probably, I think, the most important thing on this list. The other thing is people think and concept differently, and so it's up to you to understand that and know how to phrase things, how to express things so that your point gets across most effectively. This is just some examples of different types of thinkers. Everybody's kind of have their own way. But an example of this might be, if you have a visual thinker and they're looking at a layout and you've got, oh, I've got some liquid layout prototype, and you do it with just blue boxes and red boxes, a lot of times they're not going to get it, even though it's a fully working demo, because they're visual thinkers. From your side, just cut and paste their JPEG from the mock-ups and drop it in. And sometimes just having them be able to really sort of see their vision come to life just goes a long way into helping communicate your point more effectively. And this kind of goes to this point, make it real, do it their way. A lot of times we'll get visual boards or wireframes in, and we're just like, yeah, that's not going to work. And they're like, no, it'll work. It'll be really good. But a lot of times, once it's built and once it's made, if it doesn't work, it's painfully obvious. So sometimes if you can just crank something out quickly then and show it to everyone, if it's going to fail, it becomes pretty obvious. Another good point is to establish and agree to your success metrics up front. What are we trying to do? What are we trying to build? This is a great way to resolve conflict when it does come along down the road. If you can point back to, okay, these are the actual goals of the project, then it helps sort of resolve things. A complaint I always get is I don't have enough time to do things, but that's why you should take this communication and this thoughts and include it in your estimates. Just because you can crank out the code in 2 hours, if it's going to involve sitting with the designer and trying a bunch of different iterations, say it'll take 4 hours. It's the easiest way to kind of get this stuff through. Follow JSConf etiquette, which basically means don't be an asshole. And ultimately, if it's not working, try something different. Don't be afraid to change. Don't be afraid to iterate and reinvent yourselves and try new processes and try things. The way we work as a company is we all work by accounts, and every account has their own process, their own way of doing things, because that's what works best. This one-size-fits-all just doesn't work across the board. And finally, we're hiring. So if we have over 200 people in our tech group, over 50 of which are object-oriented JavaScript engineers. It's a great bunch of people. We love being here because we get to use all the products that you guys build every day, and it makes our lives so much easier. So thank you. And if there's, I think we have a break right now at 10:40, but if you guys have any questions or want to talk about this more, we'll kind of be over here, and I look forward to chatting with you. Thank you.